look what I prepared. Same.
Cheers.
Cheers.
After all this time, we're finally doing it. So
yeah, this is wonderful. Absolutely. Hi and hello everyone and welcome to the Lucas Alexander Show. I am Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's the 28th of October 2023 and this is my special tribute series remembering the Queen of Rock, Tina Turner, who sadly passed away on May 24th, 2023, exactly 5 months ago. I'm inviting a lot of different guests on to speak about Tina and how they knew her and to honor her and to make a tribute to Tina. But there is only one person who knew Tina like my guest today. He was the closest thing in her life, her personal assistant and close confidant and best friend for many years since his childhood, when he was a huge fan and worked his way in and became that close to Tina, closer than anybody else. He wrote a very eye-opening, controversial, revealing book about Tina in 1998 called The Real Tea. And he has now reissued the book, updated it with a lot of new stuff, and the book is now titled The Real Tea and Me, My 22 Years with Tina Turner by Eddy Armani. He is my guest today. He is also a very good personal friend of mine. And this surely will be a very eye-opening and revealing and probably also a controversial interview. Because Eddy tells it like it is. He is speaking his truth, and he's not afraid of saying it the way he has experienced it and seen it. And he has been through a lot and lived through a lot. And he has written this book about Tina, and for many people, they felt it was a betrayal. But for a lot of fans, it was like the Tina Turner Bible. We have the time, and it's probably going to be a very long show today because he has so much to share. This is a wonderful treat and very fascinating, and I want to welcome to the show my friend Eddy Armani. Welcome, Eddy.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, it's a pleasure.
Nobody has known Tina Turner like you, and this book came out in 1998, and I think it was kind of a shock to a lot of people that Tina had a lot of facets and a lot of different, let's say, sides to her personality. And I think before actually we go into your incredible and fascinating story and life story about how you met Tina and you got to know her as a child, you became her personal assistant and closest friend, let me first ask you something from a more objective point of view. What did Tina Turner mean to the world, let's say in show business and for people in general and for fans? And what will be her legacy, do you think?
Tina is simply unique. She was the beginning and she will be the end. What I mean by that, there was no one like Tina before Tina, and there'll be no one like Tina afterwards. We will have copycats. We will have people doing these horrible tributes. We will have people saying what they... Tina was always a mystery. And the mystery is because she lived the music. The life story of going into the whole thing, but I do have to say that working on the road with her, watching her as a child, seeing her as an adult and flourish and finally get all the fruits of her labor to become so rich and successful and happy with Erwin, her husband. Do you know what? It was a long, hard road, but you know what? She always kept going. And even to this day, I have to say that there's been issues and things in my life that have come up, and I'm so ready. And of course, I'm a little bit overly dramatic at times. I'm ready to throw the towel in. I get up, and I get upset, and I sometimes I feel alone, and I've got all kind of different things that are going on. But I always remember Tina. She would always, always, always pray on it. She would always let it digest. She never, ever, ever, never reacted in the moment. And of course, that was her saving grace, because you have to, when she was dealing with someone like Ike Turner. So I learned an incredible amount. And if I have to say, we talk about fans and people being fanatic and this and that. Yes, I was the #1 original fanatic fan of Tina Turner's. But it was a good fanatic. It's not like fanatic today. I mean, I was so able to develop a relationship with this incredible, talented woman. I mean, I watched the way she walked, the way she talked, the way she sang, the way she held her head, the way when she was like not in the mood and this. I mean, you know what? My life was Tina Turner. I grew up and everything in my life was about Tina Turner. I mean, I drove everyone around me, everyone that loved me, my family, everyone. They just let me be. And I want to explain this. It was something that we just two souls that met. And when I finally got a chance to spend that adult, mature side of my life with Tina, it was even more amazing, because it was just that we had so much in common. And she was my teacher, but she was my best friend. We talked about everything from fashion to and in those days, being gay was not something that people accepted easily. And Tina was very open with me. I mean, we talked about everything, and she was such a good friend. A lot of people will say, oh God, I'm going on a bit, aren't I? A lot of people will say, yeah, but if she's such a good friend, well, why did you write this book, and why did you betray her? Well, I want to make it very clear to those. Until you read my story and until you know my life, then don't judge me, because I tell you something. In my life, my growth, me being an artist in my own right, all of this was from this woman. I mean, if someone came to me today and said, oh, Eddie, someone's going to write a book about you, someone that was close to you, of course I would be upset. Of course I would be disappointed. Of course I would feel betrayed. And I do have to say that I do have my moments of guilt on that. Let's not get it twisted. I do have my moments. But I had to tell my story. And I felt like at a time when I had to, you got to remember something back in those days, again, like being gay and being black and being different was very hard. And I was constantly in a battle fighting with every mother out there. I mean, going back to the days of the early days when I used to call the recording studio every day after school, and Rhonda Graham would be barking in the background, hang up on him, hang up on him. That relationship with Rhonda never changed. When I grew up, and I was actually all the way up until I remember the last time seeing Rhonda, she still had that attitude with me. She always found me as a threat. Why? I don't know. Roger Davies, Tina's manager, loved me, as far as he knew that Tina was protected, that I was always there with Tina. I was her second eye. No one could ever do the things that I did with Tina, whatever. But these kind of people also, there's another side to them. Roger had his issues. And I was very much a part of the development of the new Tina, writing songs for her, doing this and doing that and whatever. But, also being very young and ambitious and reckless. Well, no, I was never reckless, but ambitious. Sometimes people don't like when they can't control you. And again, I had Rhonda first, and then I had Roger Davies, who felt he couldn't control me. And all of a sudden, then he turned on me. And then the third one was Erwin. And Erwin was but see, Erwin was different. I knew that Tina was in love with Erwin. Erwin made her happy. And I felt at this stage, and I had my own career going, and I had this going and that going. I felt, you know what? I'm not going to interfere with, and I would never, ever give her the option of having to choose between me and Erwin. No, I wouldn't do that to any of my friends. But she was very happy, and he did make her happy. But Rhonda, Roger, and Erwin all had something major in common. And that's basically, they wanted to control Tina, and they wanted to be number one of Tina. And here little me shows up, laughing, talking, giggling, gossiping, and all that stuff. They liked me when it was convenient, but when it wasn't convenient, then they wanted me out of the way.
That's very fascinating. And I want to go down, I want to go into some details about all of that as well, and to talk more about those specific people, those key players in Tina's life, because you have so much to tell, and it's important to hear it from different sides. And also, well, considering the fact that you were so young and you suddenly formed this very, very close relationship with Tina, so you felt like an outsider, even being as close to Tina as you were with all of the people around her as well. So we got to go into that too. But before we go into more of that, I just want to go talk about your backstory a little bit. You grew up in Seattle, Washington, right, in the early 60s, and eventually you moved to Los Angeles, California, and you were, what you just said, an unusual child, and quite unlike a lot of children around you, certainly. And then early on, you discovered the music of Ike and Tina Turner, and you instantly, adored and were mesmerized by Tina. Why Tina? What was it about her that, this is way before you knew her and got to know her? What was it that you saw? This was in the 60s. She was with Ike. She was young. She was wild. How did you discover Tina, and why did she make such an impact on you, or have such an impact on you?
Well, first of all, music, for some reason, at a very young age, I have always been inspired by. And I remember, oh God, I'm getting emotional. I remember there was a picture of me, and we've lost this picture, but there was a picture of me in a little red little jacket and a little bow tie. And it must have been Christmas around this time. And the music, and my family were celebrating the holidays or whatever. And this music came out of this box. And my mother said, Eddie, come on now. It's time to open presents. Come meet the other families. I was fascinated what came out of that box. And I didn't leave standing next to this box. I as a child, you don't know, but I must have been about 4 years old. But I was so fascinated by that sound. And from that moment on.
Was it a jukebox?
No. It was a family gathering, and there was a record player. Oh. And it was, and back in those days, I think there was 78, 33, and 45. And then when they stacked the records up on the 45s, and it would just play one after another, and then the next, and I just stood there staring at it. A lot of people were, fascinated with trucks and toys and this and that. To answer your question, I was fascinated with music. So the beginning of all that was like, I remember the days of the Temptations, Dinah Ross Supremes. I remember the main person I remember the most that stood out the most to me was James Brown. And I was fortunate enough after a certain age, I can't remember, a little bit older, I was able to go to a James Brown concert. And I remember that I was so young that I had to stand on the seats. And I've never, ever seen anything so incredible. And I was just fascinated. I was fascinated with music. And then there was American Bandstand and these kind of shows and whatever. But then moving fast forward, I guess after seeing the James Brown thing, I got so excited and I started dancing. And I didn't do it the James Brown way, but I did it the Eddy Armani, Eddie Hampton way, because I was Hampton back in those days. And but I had a little twist on it. So my cousin, we were about the same age. She said to me one day, she said, "Oh my God, you dance like that wild woman." And I said, "What wild woman?" She goes, "Oh, that woman I keep telling you about. I see her on television." Well, her father was a huge fan of Ike and Tina Turner's. So that's where she got the vision of me dancing like that wild woman. So then the next step was, one day we're outside playing like kids do, whatever. And she comes and grabs me and drags me in the house. And as she's dragging me in the house up the stairs, I hear this music. And I swear to you, the music was like pumping. And it was so, and you got to remember, people had televisions in those days about this size, black and white. And all I can remember is hearing this voice. And as I got closer and closer to the television, I saw these legs and I saw these lips and I saw the hair. And then I saw the Ikettes. And then in the background someplace was Ike. And Tina that was the beginning. That's when I was hooked. That's when I knew. And from that point on, yes, I loved all kind of artists. I'm a huge variety person that loves music. But no one has ever come close to Tina Turner.
Then he wants to hug and kiss on me. Everybody's sleeping and no one can see.
That's a fascinating and wonderful story about how you were introduced to her. And then you were hooked, absolutely hooked. And what year was that, do you think? Was that 65, 67, or what?
Oh, no, it had to be, it was before River Deep Mountain High. So it was before 1960, because River Deep was released in 1966. It had, don't get me on the numbers, but I do know that the single that Ike and Tina Turner had at that time was, it was I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. You walks me but he walks one day, he won't hold my hand. He say one day that he will marry me, but he tells his friends he would never be. So that was yes, that was the beginning for me.
I can't believe what you say. Exactly.
But I see what you do. Correct.
I think that was released in 64, if my Tina memory serves me right. So maybe it was 64, 65. I mean, you must have been a little kid at that time, certainly, but enough for you to really fall for her massively, probably because I would expect you had never seen any woman on television like that before, right? I mean, there was nothing else.
No, and I do have to say that I and with women performers, I do have to say, and it still is exactly the same today. I love women that are not like, I like all women, but I like women that are different and that I like Cher, Tina, Diana Ross. I like women that break the rules, that are not, and the women who do follow the rules. I love them too. Don't misunderstand me. But I think there's an animalistic something forbidden about Cher and Tina and women like that I just absolutely fell for. I mean, it's the same thing with James Brown. He was the male version. He was totally different than other black male performers. I mean, the only thing closer to James Brown I remember at that time, basically, but that was much later that I realized, was Otis Redding. I mean, what an incredible performer. I like people that just basically break the rules.
Exactly, and they were so fascinating. But certainly nobody like Tina. Even back in the day, Cher was kind of very held back, but she was unusual. And then later on, of course, she was just out there as well, and still is.
Yes.
And looking just amazing even now here in 2023. She just released a Christmas album.
A Christmas album, which is actually, I do have to say, I've been listening to it, and it's actually quite good. But I think what else too, I forgot to insert this into the question that you asked me about why Tina. I like tomboys. I like women that are tomboys. I like women that can wear the frilly dresses and be all pretty and girly and do all that stuff. But then the next thing you know, they're climbing a bloody tree, or they're swinging ropes, and then on the old tires they used to have, going across the river. And a lot of these women would kind of dare the boys, like, okay, if you can do it, I can do it. Tina had a song years ago, and they used to call it, if you can Hully Gully, then I can Hully Gully too. And we talked about that once, and I said, oh, Tina, I love that song because it was about, Hully Gully was a dance song that people used to do, and it was mostly in the black culture, clubs and stuff. And she said, oh, because I used to always say to them, well, if you can Hully Gully, I can Hully Gully too. So it means just because you're a man, don't think that I can't do it too. And I love that. So going back to, again, I love strong women. I love women that are daring, but can still be girly and pretty and feminine.
In a way, actually, that it describes yourself, right? Even though you are a man, you're still both. So it must have been a mirror that you could relate to with Tina, right?
Yes, it was. It was, and even being so young, not even knowing about myself, and God, I mean, it was nothing sexual back in those days when I was really young. It was just a connection. When you connect with someone, you connect. And I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family. I mean, my own father, hit the road, Jack. But I had uncles, and I had my grandfather. I had a lot of men I grew up with. So it wasn't like I grew up in a household of just women. I had some very strong, loving men in my family. So it wasn't that excuse the expression, it wasn't that sissy type of thing of just being around women. I just love beauty. I mean, I remember before I knew what I remembered and what I liked, I used to remember on the Saturdays, the black and white movies would come on, and Joan Crawford and Betty Davis and these strong women, and that look and that action and this, and Rosalind Russell, and again, these are women. They're very, very feminine, beautiful women, but they're very strong tomboy,
and kind of outrageous as well. They'll do and say anything.
Absolutely. And I like that. I like people. I like a little bit. One of my oldest favorites, of course, is Mae West. I mean, you couldn't get a stronger, more. And if you stop and look, and I watched something on Mae recently. I mean, she was actually so tomboy. She was so drag. She brought and she used to do things about, honey, if it wasn't for me, there wouldn't be no queens. I mean, she was fantastic. I've always admired strong women.
Certainly you had this connection with Tina, but from watching her on television, and you had moved from Seattle to Los Angeles.
Yes.
Just a kid. From watching Tina, who tries to get to know somebody like that? Who does that at that age? I mean,
when we were still in Seattle, Washington, and I was obsessed with Ike and Tina Turner, the Ikettes, the Kings of Rhythm, that sound and all that stuff. Well, I grew up in a Baptist church, and I used to go to church, And I used to go almost every Sunday. And I would go with my mother, but I really enjoyed going with my grandmother. And because my grandmother was my world. And I'd go to my grandmother's, and I was in the choir. And by this time, oh gosh, I don't know. See, age will always get me screwed up. But anyway, I was in the choir, and I got a chance to do a lead, a solo. And so they would give me the solo, and I'll never forget, the name of the song was anyway, I'm not going to try to remember it now because I can't remember. I remember it in my head, but I can't remember it to tell you. But anyway, I was so excited. I got my solo lead, and I was going to sing in the church, and it was on Sunday. My grandmother was there. My mother came to see me, and I had all my family there and all this stuff, and they gave me the song, and we rehearsed it in the choir, and then it came time to perform it. Well, normally you would think, oh my gosh, come on, Eddie, don't go shy on us now. You know, come on now. Oh, don't worry about that. All of a sudden the solo came, and it had turned into Thank You, Jesus, Lord Have Mercy, Holy Gospel, Tina Turner. I mean, everything that I had watched and learned about Tina turned into Sunday church. And I was running around, and I was, you know, even then I didn't have probably a quarter inch of hair on my head, but I was throwing my head like she and the Ikeheads did. I just took on this persona of her. And so after that, and then being in church and believing in God and praying every night and every night when I finished my prayers was, oh God, please let me meet Tina Turner. Oh God, please let me meet Tina Turner. Oh my gosh, please. So that was the beginning of my prayers and my dreams. And then we moved to Los Angeles, and I had a very kind of rough time adjusting, because I went to an all black school for the first time ever in my life, and it was very difficult for me. The kids used to tease me because I spoke properly. You know, it was just my environment. When I lived in Seattle, grew up with all kind of mixed kids and whatever, and I didn't really know the difference between. And I always had this fascination with the English accent. So I went to school with a lot of English kids for some reason. So when I came to Los Angeles, that was junior high school. The kids used to make fun of me. They used to beat me up. I remember, and not exaggerating without going into a whole thing, I used to almost get beat up every day after school. And I thought, well, I ain't taking this. So I would always make an excuse just before 3 o'clock when school was let out. I would raise my hand 10 minutes beforehand and go, oh, miss, can I please go out? I'm not feeling well, or can I go to the loo? I always made an excuse so I could leave school early. Well, the kids that used to bully me got wind of this, and then they used to find me anyway. And so, make a long story short, there was one particular day, and I just had enough. And I remember I had gone roller skating. We used to have roller skates back in those days, and you would put your shoes on top of the skates, and you would tighten them and whatever. Anyway, oh gosh, this sounds a little bit like Tina, but it's true. I had one beating too many. And I thought, oh no, I'm not dealing with that. I'm not. And it was something in my head that clicked. And so I'll never forget, I left the school early. I was going down the one street and thought I had made a shortcut and got rid of the kids. And they were meeting me on the other side. And then I tried to run. And the only thing I could do is run up these stairs to this lady's house. So I bammed on the door and I said to her, please, please help me. They're going to beat me up. Da-da-da. And it's like something out of a Bette Davis movie, honestly. And this, and in Los Angeles, people had screen doors because it'd be so hot. They would have the screen door and their doors open so they can get a breeze. And a band van, she came and she had the fag hanging out her mouth. And she said to me, she actually reminds me a lot of the girl who played Zelma in the Tina movie.
Jennifer Lewis.
Jennifer Lewis. She reminded me so much of Jennifer Lewis. I remember that. And a little bit like, she said, I don't know what you're doing up here, but you better get down those stairs. I don't care what they do to you. And I'll never forget that, look at her. And I said, oh, please, please. She says, I'm telling you now, get off of my stairs and take them with you. And and then I had to like, and as a child, I must have been 13 and a half then. And something clicked, and I took the roller skates because I had my roller skates because I had roller skated earlier that day at school and I was in my shoes. And I took the roller skates, and it was like parting the Red Sea. And I was like a maniac. And I went down these, because the woman's house was quite high. And I went down these stairs swinging. All I did was swing. And as I swung, they start partying the Red Sea. And I remember the kids going, he's crazy. He's crazy. And that was the beginning of saving my life. But then was the beginning of me really becoming isolated. Isolating myself from other kids of my age. So my only refuge was my bedroom with my music, all my Ike and Tina Turner records and all my posters. And I'd go home and do my chores and do my homework. And after that, it was just Ike and Tina Turner. So that was all I was obsessed with. And then one day it hit me and I said, well, I just got to call Ike and Tina and just speak to them. You know, it was, as a child, it was just like that. So I picked up the phone and called and asked for information. Can I speak to Ike and Tina Turner? Can you give me their phone number? And they said, I'm sorry, there's no listing. Da, 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 da. Anyway, this must have gone on for like, no exaggeration. Gosh, it must have went on for over a month. And I was reading the album.
Did you call every day?
Every single day, asking to see if the operator finally got the number. And then after that, one day I was reading the album cover, and it was one of the album covers. I can't remember. It was before Working Together, one of those albums, and I was looking at the credits, because when I used to buy albums,
maybe Come Together, that was before the album Come Together.
Yeah, I think it was Come Together. It was before Proud Mary, or during that time. And no, because Come Together had to come first, right? But anyway, it said, and I used to, I don't know if you did this, I used to read the album cover credits like I was reading the Bible.
I certainly did too.
The musicians were, I knew who the photographer was, I knew who this was and that was. So I actually saw at the very bottom, it says recorded at Bolic Sound Recording Studios. So then I thought, let me call information. I called information thinking that they wouldn't have the number for me. And she said, hold on, here's your number. And I went, oh, I started screaming. Wait, hold on, I don't have a pen. All the times I was calling, I always have my pens on paper. This time she gives me a number and I don't have anything. So I don't know, I got a bit of hair in my mouth there. So anyway, she gave me the phone number and I froze. And I went, oh my gosh, I've got Ike and Tina Turner's phone number. So anyway, I think after staring into space for X amount of time or whatever, I got the courage up to call this number. And I called, and the woman answered. She said, Bolic Sound Recording Studio. And I said, can I speak to Tina Turner? Can I speak to Tina Turner, please? I'm her biggest fan in the world. My name is Eddie Hampton. And da-da-da-da. And the woman said, okay, slow down, back up. Tina's not here at the moment, but da-da-da-da. And this woman took a liking to me. Her name was Linda Krause, and she worked under Rhonda. And she always used to take time out for me and whatever. And the beginning of me meeting Tina was, I was such a fan. And you have to remember in those days that Ike and Tina Turner's audience was mature. Here I was a kid. You would have thought I would have been to Donny Osmond and bubblegum pop and all this stuff. I hated it. I remember, I loved the blues. I loved real music. I didn't like this bubblegum shit. So Linda took it and took a kindness to me. And so one day when I called her, and this carried on. I would still call every day after school. She would speak to me. And then every now and then there would be some woman barking in the background going, hang up on him, hang up on him. It was Rhonda Graham. So Rhonda Graham knew who I was. And she was just like, oh, he's just a pest. That little fan. Oh, Tina's not interested in that boy.
Well, you know that I knew Rhonda as well and interviewed her. But it's interesting, actually, that Rhonda got to know Tina and became the manager for Ike and Tina Turner and the road manager and did all of that. But she also started out as a fan, actually.
Yes, she did. She used to go to the nightclub where they performed. You're absolutely correct. And it was amazing because back in those days, I think Rhonda's from the Valley, Van Nuys or someplace like that. And she was this white girl going up to these clubs. And it could be a little bit rough and tough, but nothing deterred her. I mean, Rhonda was, Rhonda was a tough cookie. She worked very hard. She was terribly intelligent, and she was devoted to no one else but Tina. Now, she pretended, and she had to go through the motions and do whatever with Ike because she was a businesswoman and she was their manager and she looked after everything. And I'll tell you something, any bit of anything about Ike and Tina Turner, Rhonda knew everything. But Rhonda, again, her idol was Tina.
It's true. Yeah. It really was Tina. But also what was fascinating, not only in Tina's first autobiography, I Tina from 1986, which was also in the musical, actually, was the fact that Rhonda also became Ike's first white girlfriend. When Ike was, of course, married to Tina, he had so many women on the side. You're probably, we're going to go into that as well. But I mean, but Rhonda was never really into Ike, right? It was something she had to do, or was she kind of forced to do it in order to be the manager and,
she
be
was
there with them?
Yes, and Rhonda was forced, and Ike was forceful, and he used his power. He used his everything that he had. Listen, I'm going to say this, and I might get in trouble, but I don't give a shit. I grew up with Rhonda, around Rhonda. I knew her when I was a child. I knew her as in the middle, and I knew her as an adult. The only love that Rhonda ever loved was Tina. Rhonda was in love with Tina. A lot of people don't want to admit it because it's like, oh my God, she's not here anymore. And then she can't defend herself. Rhonda was lesbian. I don't think she was a lesbian that liked being a lesbian. She was basically, the only love for her was Tina. And if anybody had ever been around Tina and they'd been around Rhonda, it was so obvious. And Tina knew this, of course. Tina was not lesbian. Tina was not bisexual. She wasn't any of those things. But Tina also was quite conniving and knew this and used Rhonda to her advantage. I mean, let's not all of a sudden, I will give you want to know about Tina, I'll tell you about Tina. Tina is the most loveliest person, my idol, but she was no angel. I mean, she was no angel. Let's not get it twisted here. I mean, Tina had her ways, and Tina was, and I tell you something. Oh, see, I'm going ahead of it. So you get me going. But Tina was very clever.
Sorry, but this is how it's gonna be today.
Well, and Tina was very clever. Tina knew after the first X amount of years she was with Ike, she liked the life, but she didn't like the life with Ike. But she knew she had to learn, that she had to do what she had to do to get strong enough that one day she could leave him. Ike was sensitive and knew that too. He knew that Tina wouldn't stay. But what he made the mistake of doing was, Ike was one of those kind of men. Now, I'm going to interject here for a second just to say that Ike was no different than a lot of men. Back in those days, all the men used to beat their wives. All the men used to go out drinking and get drunk. And yes, especially in the Black community or the poor community of the country, but even the most epic class, the richest of the rich, he goes out, gets drunk, and has his affairs, to come home and knocks his wife around. She doesn't say anything because the next day she goes to Saks Fifth Avenue and she goes shopping. But the poor woman, average women, they have a black eye, or what's the worst thing? They end up pregnant, because he comes home and he really wants to give it one. Black culture has always been men having a bad day, going out to the tavern or to the local, getting drunk, coming home and giving his wife the blues. And there's been a lot of cases where a lot of women, you mess with the wrong woman, then, you won't live to tell, as Madonna says. But no, it has been always a little bit of a lot of fighting going on. Back in those days, men, women, humans. didn't treat each other the best that they could. It's when we became a little bit more aware of what was going on that we could talk about it. It's the same thing without going into, I don't want to go into another area, but it's like, being molested or raped or this and that. People didn't talk about these things, you see. But going back to Tina felt like, okay, I'll deal with this because something, there's two things going on. At the end of the day, he can have all the women he wants and and then they can come, they can have the party house and they can do the drugs and do this. But I'm number one. I'm number one because without Tina, there is no Ike. She always knew that. Don't let it get it twisted. Tina knew. Tina was, but because she was so abused and so taken advantage of, Tina would go to Ike and say, "Oh, Ike, I just saw this new dress I want to get. Oh, can I have it?" And he would say, "No, you can't have it." But then he'd turn around and go to buy some musician's wife that he's knocking up a brand new Volkswagen. Or you get people like Judy Cheeks, who Ike and Tina discovered and this and that and and she was, oh, don't even get me started on that one. She had Judy does have a lovely voice and she's very talented, but she was one of the ones too, but she was one of the only few people that after the Ike and Tina Turner days, Rhonda and her, the only two that Tina actually kept in her circle. But Judy was more because Judy lived in Germany and, wasn't around that much or whatever. But I don't want to go off track, but these men beating women, it was a little bit of a norm, not to be accepted. Don't misunderstand me at all, but it was what happened.
But Ike was still had a huge psychological problem, right? He was like really either maybe what you today would call a narcissist or a borderline personality disorder or bipolar or different things. He was like both the charmer and the tyrant, right?
Ike was all the above. all the above that you just mentioned, Ike was. Ike had lots of issues, but there's that old saying, with genius, come on, fill in. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
When people are geniuses and they have this gift of this music and this ear and this and that, then they also have the devil on their shoulder, and they've got all these other issues. I did fair enough to him, with due respect. He came up at a time too, as a black man that was very, very difficult and hard. And these kind of things that, he supposedly was taken advantage of by a woman when he was at a young age. He saw his father get beaten to death. He was there with the riots, the racism going on and being poor, and he had to go off to make money so he could help his mother and do this and do that. And, I have to say, honestly, in Ike, I'm going to say in Ike's position and people of that time, I praise them. I don't know how they got through. When I just a couple of days ago was just thinking about slavery, I was thinking about, oh gosh, my great-great-grandparents and this and that, the Holocaust, the war that is going on today and whatever. I don't know how people do it. I have the utmost respect, but I tell you something, this shouldn't be. This shouldn't be. This shouldn't be. The way that man, and I don't want to go off the subject, but but the way that man treats man is just is despicable, and we have a lot to learn. So you've got those
it's absolutely
times.
Horrible what's going on in the world, and also also just locally with families and all of that. This is what we're talking about here with domestic violence. But we do know that Ike had a hard time, and also when he was growing up and all of that. But still, to be this inconsiderate, to be this domineering and abusing Tina this to this incredible extent, and other women as well. and also going through all of these women in front of Tina, having all of those sexual escapades and the drugs, and even with the musicians' wives.
Yeah, there is absolutely no excuse for that man's behavior. And being a young boy, because I started Ike and Tina Turner's first ever fan club. And I remember that one of the treats was that I used to go to the recording studio, and I think I was about 14 then, and I could go there on the weekend for a couple of hours. And I'll tell you something, it was so much going on, and it was such a great lesson for me to see a lot of stuff that goes on, whatever. But in that mixture of all that stuff going on, we just came out of the hippie time, free love, everybody does what they want, who's zooming who, nobody knows or whatever. But, and all the stuff basically that happened at Bolic Sound Recording Studio with all the orgies and this and that and all that kind of stuff, and the drugs and the women and this and that. It was no different than with the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin. It was no difference. The only difference is that Tina was in the forefront and she was the moneymaker and she was the star, and he treated her like shit. But he had a mentality that, have you ever heard this expression? Of course you have. If you treat them mean, you keep them keen, type of thing. So a lot of people's mentality think that if they're nice, and I used to do that. He could also tell when Tina was pulling away, and then he would try to make up for it. And the only way that he could make up for it for Tina in those days is that she would go shopping. That was her outlet, But she knew it's no excuse what he did. Don't misunderstand me. But at the same time, Tina knew she was getting in bed with the devil.
She knew that already from the get-go, you think?
Tina knew she got in bed with the devil. She saw the way that I treated Lorraine, Ike Jr., and Michael's mother, the way he treated all those other women. When Tina wasn't even involved with Ike on a sexual level, she got a chance. She saw all of that. But at the same time, you asked me if I personally had saw all that, and being in Tina's position, would have went running, or would I would have stayed? No, I would have stayed, because I would have wanted to build a career. And back in those days, show business was show business. And then otherwise you go back home, you're going to be a maid for someone, or you're going to be a nurse, or you're going to go to a very mundane life. Tina wasn't mundane. She had stars in her eyes from the beginning. You remember something in the beginning, Tina said that she used to go watch them play, and she used to be so ready to jump on that stage, and Ike would never give her the microphone, and da-da-da. You got to remember something, and this does not at all dismiss any of Ike's foolish behavior, but Tina just figured within, like, okay, I want to be a star so bad, and I want to perform so bad, and I'll do whatever it takes, and da-da-da-da, 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 da-da-da-da. And that's why Ike and Tina's relationship was not romantic. It was one of those kind of things that just kind of happened one night, and da-da-da. And then as it happened, Ike realized that Tina was going to end up being, he renamed her, and that she was going to be, Fool in Love happened and all that. Then he felt like, I have to put my stamp on this, and I have to make sure that no, the man, we have to be together, because can you imagine Ike and Tina being together, and Ike going out there doing all the stuff he want to do, and then Tina going, well, I go out there and do all the stuff I want to do too. Oh, no. Men don't have that. Men don't play that. You know what I mean? They can do what they want to do, but you can't do what you want to do. So Tina knew all that. Tina knew. But she didn't expect, and she didn't deserve the treatment that she got. But she was the breadwinner. If there was an Ike and Tina Turner show booked, and I remember this going to the recording studio back in the day, if Ike was sick, they would still go on the road and do a show without Ike. If Tina was sick, there was no show.
Exactly. Absolutely. So, I mean, do take us back to the starting point. How did you meet Tina? You went to the reception, the opening of the Bolic Sound recording studio. Was that how it all started?
Yes, it was again Linda Krause, the woman that used to answer the phone to me every day, who had a surprise for me, invited me down to the recording studio, and I was there, and it was a big thing for me. I was the only child there. I must have been about 14 years old.
What about Ike and Tina's children at that time?
It's in my book, but at the end of it, the press come up and say, "Oh, Ike and Tina, is this your son?" And Ike says, "No, but he's such a pain in the ass. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put him, he's such a fan of me and Tina's, I'm going to put him in charge of all the fan mail." And that's how I got the idea of starting Ike and Tina Turner's fan club, which was a joke from Ike, but I took it serious, of course. And that was the beginning. There were no children around at all. No children around at all.
And then take us through what happened on that day. How did you see Tina the first time?
Well, Linda said to me, she says, and of course, when I walked in, my mother dropped me off, spoke to Linda, and I'm looking around and I'm looking through all this smoke and legs and hair and men and hats, all of this, remember, because I was shorter, and all this action going on, and I was just like, where is she? So Linda had to finish the details with my mother while I was standing there waiting, and then finally my mother left, and Linda said, "Oh," I said, "Where is she?" She goes, "Now, Eddie, now listen, we have to have a little talk. You got to calm down a bit, and you have to do this because," and I said, "Okay, fine." And then Linda was going to take me back to meet Tina, and then she had to do something. So then she said, "Eddie, listen, I don't want you to have to sit here, stand there and wait. If you go straight all the way down the hall there and make a left and go in the recording studio, you'll see Tina." So I did, and I went and I made a left, and Mike Stewart, who was the president of United Artists Records at the time, was sitting there with Tina listening to a new song. And when I walked through that doorway, I just stood there mesmerized. And it was almost like, and Tina knew I was coming because they told her about her number one fan and all that stuff. And I just was staring, I was staring at her, and she was like fidgeting, kind of, smiled at me, and she smiled and did that whole thing. And then it was kind of like, I made her more uncomfortable, and she was kind of like, then that fake smile starts coming in. She's like, cute, nice to meet you, good. And then I just all of a sudden walked up to her and I said, "Hi, Tina Turner, my name is Eddie Hampton, and I'm your biggest fan in the world. And I'm so happy to meet you." And she says, "Okay, thank you very much. That's very kind. Slow down a bit, dear. Okay, great." And then the next thing was, she said to me, I'll never forget it. She goes, "Are you enjoying yourself?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "Okay, good." She goes, "Well, why don't you run along now? I'm sure there's some little hors d'oeuvres and things there." She couldn't get rid of me fast enough. And that was the beginning. I was a pest. I was a pest, but I was a good pest. And then at that point, she was sitting there with Mike Stewart and whatever. And I just stood there like this, staring at her. And I guess she thought, well, if he's not going to leave, then I am. And she excused herself. And I just stood there mesmerized and watched her walk out. And that was the beginning. And the end of that evening was with Ike saying that he was going to put me in charge of all the fan club now. Well, by the time I got home after the party and did all that stuff, I said to my mother, "Oh, I have a job." And my mother looked at me like I was mad, like, "What are you on about?" I said, "Well, Ike Turner said that I can start Ike and Tina Turner's fan club and stuff." And he did say it, but it was a joke. And that was the beginning. That was just and then the obsession, the love, the music. And then I got more into my music and I started growing up a bit, and everything was every time I could get, back in those days, it was different. Because I was underage, if you went with somebody that was of age, you could go to concerts and you could go. I went to see Jimi Hendrix when I was 14 years old, and I was standing backstage on the side there, watching this man burn his guitar and crash and do all this. I thought, oh, he's a bit mad. So I would talk everybody into taking me to an Ike and Tina Turner show, and they would. And I have to say that I was very, very terribly persuasive growing up. You don't look at things like that when you're doing it, but I was a conniving little thing. To be honest with you, now I look back and I go, you were very conniving, and I was, because I wanted what I wanted. And the other thing was that that was my only vice. That was on my only vice. I wasn't really into playing with other kids, and I wasn't that bothered with cartoons, and I wasn't bothered with, and I grew up having to be responsible for my younger brother and sister and all of that kind of stuff. And while I was looking after them and whatever, I had melodies and music going through my head. It was all about music for me. It was all about music for me. And even to this day, before we came on to do this interview, I had to get myself, of course, get myself into the groove. And you know what? It doesn't matter how young I am or how old I am. There's something about hearing Tina's voice that just actually gets me in the mood for whatever I want to do. And that voice is, and something else too about Tina, I have to interject here to say this. If you listen to Tina's early recordings, and you listen to Tina's mid recordings, and you listen to Tina's success recordings, what an incredible woman, what she did with her voice, the development, the growth, the strength. I mean, she was just, and again, I have to say, I worked with Tina, went on the road with Tina. And I was actually, I don't remember how many years, but it was quite a few years. Do you know that we would get colds and a little bit of a flu or whatever? Do you know that Tina never, ever missed one show?
I know. She never would. No, she never did.
No, but not one. She never played the diva thing. Oh, not tonight. I'm not in the mood. Darling, bring me down. She was not like that at all. She demanded the best. She demanded that you know your job and know what you're doing and know this and know that, whatever. But she would never ask you to do something that she wouldn't do for herself. She was very, very good. Like, she was very considerate like that. Tina was very kind. She was a little tight. Tina wasn't a generous person. And I'm going to explain why she wasn't a generous person. She wasn't a generous person because all those years that she worked her ass off and she worked so hard, she saw Ike throw money at everybody except for her. So when she started making money, it was like, oh no, actually, it's all about me now. And she was absolutely right and correct because she worked her ass off. And it is true. When she left him, by the time they were going to finish doing this and doing that, and she knew how violent I could be and this and that, it was just like, fuck it, forget it. And it's the truth. It's like, I can't deal with this man. If I do fight him for anything, my life is at stake here, and something's going to happen. So, I mean, when I actually years later went to go live at the house, and look after the boys so Tina could go into hiding, we slept on the floor. We slept on the floor because we were so afraid. Ike's moods could change at any second. You didn't know. And especially he was down, after Tina left, he was down at Bolic Sound Recording Studio throwing big parties. All the coke was going around. And I remember as being 14 and a half. I remember seeing the white big things of the coke, and I did know what it was, but I didn't know what it was. And what I mean by that is that I knew it was something that wasn't quite right, because back in those days, I think it was the black movies, and there was always Shaft or this or that, and people used to wear coke spoons around their neck back in the 70s.
Really?
People used to wear little chains and have a little Coke spoon on it, and they would just take the Coke spoon off and dip into it and do the little thing. And I used to see them walking around doing like that. I thought it was actually quite fascinating, actually, because I thought to myself, okay, they're shoveling it up there, but it was a big tray of it. And then it would be that kind of thing where you would see in the corner of your eye, you see them when Ike stepped out of the room or turned his head or whatever, they would try to take some and all that stuff. And it was an experience for me, because I think that's why I became, growing up, very anti-drugs also, is because I saw things going on. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I knew that there was something going on. And that Bolic Sound Recording Studio, let me tell you something, it was a mess. It was a mess. It really was. And it had also this other thing that I never hear people talk about. It's it was a little, he had his private upstairs thing that was hidden behind this wall thing, but that had a clock on it. But then, and he had the 2 recording studios and the pool table room and all that stuff. But then they had this ceiling, or what do you call it, like a cellar. And it was a thing, you pull it down and it had steps on it, and you would go up there. And I think I went up there twice. And also I was quite nosy, let's not get it twisted. And but I think one of the musicians showed me, and it was all these little rooms, very geisha, like, you know, big pillows and stuff. And that's where they would go and take the girls. It was wild.
Right. Unbelievable. It must have been such wild times. And you got to work actually at Bolic Sound and be there a lot, right? And also when Tina came in for recording, and what then you started that fan club and you were allowed to do it, right? Please take us through that and talk about how that actually came to pass. I want to thank you all for watching my show, The Lucas Alexander Show, and this special tribute series I'm doing remembering the Queen of Rock, Tina Turner. She will always and forever be simply the best. Please like and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for notifications. Your support is greatly appreciated. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you again soon.